And it doesn't matter what industry you gather experience in. It really is, what are you learning at every step, and how do you manage to build really trusted networks? At the end of the day, we are in a completely digital society. We're all on these different platforms. We have public personas, digital personas. You don't know who is who anymore. And understanding how to create trust in a relationship is going to become increasingly important.
It's DeAndre here, and this is The Pioneer Show, the show where we talk with innovators, makers, entrepreneurs, basically people who are trailing their own trails and creating their own lives, so that we all can learn how to work on our own lives. If this is your first time here, thank you for downloading and listening, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear this episode. Subscribe and enjoy listening to the pioneers of today. And if you're a repeat listener, welcome back. This is episode 26, and I'm your host, André Delpkerk. You can find me at It's DeAndre on Twitter, as well as the show at Pioneers Show on Instagram. Before we start this conversation with our guest, I really would like to thank Piabo PR for even arranging it. Piabo PR is a PR company that works with a lot of startups here in Berlin, and they were the media partners at the We Are Developers World Congress 2019, an event that I was part of and had a chance to interview a couple of people. This conversation will be uploaded in the upcoming weeks. Now, with that in mind, I would like to introduce you to Catherine Bischoff, and she is the Chief Relationship Officer at Factory Berlin. I know that in these past two episodes, I'm introducing people with either industries or job titles. Were it not, this is all easily explained. Catherine, as the CRO of Factory Berlin, is working daily on making sure that Factory Berlin has a great environment for startups, corporate students, and freelancers alike to flourish not only with their physical, but also digital presence. Factory Berlin will be explained during the interview, but it's a community that has, the last time I heard, over 3,000 people connected using their campuses in Berlin or using their Slack channel. Catherine used to work in academia, but also as a relationship manager in other businesses, and this truly intrigued me. As someone who prides himself as trying to build a good network and good relationships, I really wanted to learn more. Without waiting a lot more time, let's jump into the conversation. And with us we have Catherine. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, I'm great. A little hot.
Yeah, today in Berlin, it's something that is very pleasant to say that it's hot outside. It's not very common, right?
That's true.
So for people who don't know who you are, care to give us a presentation?
Sure. My name is Catherine Bischoff, and I'm the Chief Relationship Officer at Factory Berlin.
Okay, let's just start off with Factory Berlin. For people who don't know what it is, care to give us like a 2-second pitch again?
Sure. Factory is a community. It's a community of innovators, which means that we curate applications from people who are interested in coming and building their network. They could be technologists, they could be creators, creatives, founders looking for talent, looking for investors. They may be fixed startup teams already, corporates, and or even accelerator programs that want to be part of the Factory community. We have 3,000 of those from 70 different nationalities. And so we have 2 locations here, digital platform, and then the manifestation of the network is essentially the physical space and all the events that we put on there.
I used to be a member of Factory, and one of the things that really triggered my attention was the 3,000 member thing, because I saw the spaces, they're incredible, but I thought 3,000 people don't fit here. But you focus a lot on community, and when I heard of it first was co-working space.
Sure.
And one thing that I always remember is that there was a distinction of co-working, but also the community is the main target. So what's the main difference for Factory? What's the main difference of just the co-working space with building a community per se?
So I think co-working, when you hear about what we do, people generally gravitate to concepts that they understand and that are prevalent in the market. And when you have a beautiful space where you have freelancers and entrepreneurs and talents gathering, you assume it's a co-working space. And indeed, we did start that way, but we realized quite quickly that the value is not in the actual desk space or renting out a physical space to someone. It's the value that you bring in creating a network for people. So we pivoted a few years ago and said co-working is dead, because what really is valuable is community. So that's why we focus on curating who gets in. So you have to apply to be part of the factory, which certainly differentiates us from a co-working space where you just apply to get a space. And if they have space, they'll sell you space. And when you apply, you have to also share what it is that you're willing to give into the community. So it's not just about being there, occupying the space or attending events. It's what are you going to share? Because we really, really believe in peer-to-peer communication, peer-to-peer networking, and that knowledge sharing is the only way that we're going to advance as a society. So that's really what we focus on. And so there is that interviewing process. And so if you say you're interested in becoming a member, we want to understand what it is that you're bringing to the table. What are your intentions of being part of the factory? Have you been referred to us? Do you understand what the concept is? And if you write, well, I'm actually just looking for an affordable table, then we'll send you to another place, let's just say.
Okay. Before we go a lot more deeper, I would like to take a step back in your own career. Something that I did my own little research, as everybody in the show knows. You mentioned networking, and one of the things that I was seeing as your job titles at least had were a lot of almost like a networking as a business kind of situation. I remember event manager at FIBA, basketball. I love basketball. Everybody knows that I love basketball. But event manager, and there, I assume from what I've known in event management and my whole life as well, is that you have to have a lot of connections. You have to know who to talk with to get things done. Then you move on to Corbis, if I'm not mistaken. And once again, relationship is in the job title. So for people who, like me, go more into a facilitator role, like to make connections, like to connect people, how do you get paid to do this?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to like being a communicator and being a networker. In every role that I've had, indeed, communication and stakeholder relations have been a key component to those roles. And that's, regardless if it's more from a marketing comms angle or from an event management or sponsor acquisition angle or for, contributor or developer relations standpoint. I think that especially as technology advances and a lot of the jobs out there are going to be automated, eventually even disappear. Having strong soft skills, having a sense of empathy, a good sense of communication, understanding how to build a rapport with people is going to become increasingly important. And that's something I've built on more and more in my career. And then understanding kind of what the whole is, taking a more holistic approach and understanding how pieces of the puzzle come together to build networks. And so I think this particular role I find incredibly exciting just because it amalgamates all the experience I've gathered. And it doesn't matter what industry you gather experience in. It really is what are you learning at every step and how do you manage to build really trusted networks. At the end of the day, we are in a completely digital society. We're all on these different platforms. We have public personas, digital personas. You don't know who is who anymore. And understanding how to create trust in a relationship is going to become increasingly important. And that's what also attracted me to the factory, because it was all about this community of people that buy into a certain concept. They believe in it. And because it's curated, there's a level of trust. It's all about referrals. 70% of our community comes through referrals. That means something. It's not like signing up for any old social platform or newsletter, right? And so I think that for me, my career has really taken an incredible path because I've been able to do this, and also in different geographies, cultural settings, and languages. And that's another thing. I mean, I was lucky to have grown up in a household where we spoke 3 languages at home. And so I was always, had a European background with my parents being German and French. And then I grew up in English-speaking Canada. And then Canada being Canada, it's multicultural. So you're always exposed to different things.
And also bilingual in some places. So you
and
also
bilingual,
have that part.
Exactly. And all these things are really enriching. It makes you think differently. You don't, you don't always take things for granted, and you have to look at different opportunities and different challenges with different lenses, because you can't just look at it through the eyes of a, white teenager girl growing up in suburban Canada. Maybe you have to like take into account the other, thoughts and cultural backgrounds that are around you. So I think that, if it's this type of role, or if networking or stakeholder relations is something that you're interested in, you really have to have an open mind, and you have to take on different perspectives and understand different perspectives, and then again build trust with counterparts.
Yeah, trust is the thing that I find is the most important part in this situation, at least, because like you said, you have public persona, you have the digital persona. And most of us, or people that I know that try to have some kind of stakeholder relationship or internal community management for the outside, let's call it, is that they just try to build a LinkedIn network. Probably they just add, I don't care about them. And one of the things that in my career, one of the things that I always try to do is I like making connections. I like to make connections and just say, be friends, please. You are perfect for each other no matter what you do. And I think that the trust building is very important, because it's not only trust in other people, at the same time creating trust for yourself. If you're making a good connection, people can trust your own voice. So this is also something that I wanted to hear you say, because I think that it's very important for people who like to make these kinds of things, let's say working on relationships, eventually going on, if a company has that, an ambassador role or community management or community building or even sales positions, it's very important to make connections, but at the same time work on making those connections meaningful, just not caring about the 3,000 connections on LinkedIn and not knowing who it is or just knowing by the title. I think that's very important. And I'm very glad that you said that, because I think that nowadays people are caring much more about their vanity metrics and not caring about the depth of their conversations, depth of knowledge. Knowing you now, it's more important, and having this conversation is more important than just having you on LinkedIn or having scraped bumped shoulders on Factory. I think that's very important to have a meaningful conversation in knowing who you're talking about, because this way, if I ever meet anyone or you ever meet anyone that might be interested, if we make a connection, we have a real connection, or at least a real understanding of at least the minimum part that you know who I am and I know who you are. And I think that's very important to have.
Yeah, and if you refer someone to me or to the Factory Berlin or into my network, I'm going to automatically have a different perspective on that person, because I've already I've been engaged with you. Yeah. I've had a conversation. We've met in person, and that changes the dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that not only I would say you don't have to, at least in my personal view, you don't have to specifically know them personally. But for example, when I used to work at Techstars, they had like this motto was give first. And when I know somebody who has this kind of motto, so if somebody sends me a message and how can I help? It's already a big takeaway that this person at least has a good heart. Yeah. They might have some ulterior motives, but I'll at least very naively say this person has a good heart. And once again, there's a connection, might not even be personally. I met a guy here today at this event at We Are Developer Conference. And that was the first time that I actually saw him face to face, but I've been in touch with him for a couple of months already through a Discord server. I met him through an online course that I'm taking. And he's living here in Berlin. I live in Berlin, but it's the first time that we actually had met face to face. But because of the conversations that we had and the things that he's building, I already have an idea and I've already made connections with him, because I trust that nobody would do this unless they had a genuine care for what they're doing,
Yeah, I completely agree. And we also believe in give first.
That's good. I think, the give first mentality, I think, is the thing that we all need to do. One thing that then you worked in your career, and we'll get back to Factory, is you worked at the University of Waterloo, right?
Yeah.
I love talking about education. I think that education is, for me, and I'm sorry for anybody who might be worried about healthcare or anything, but I think education is the most pressing matter that we need to tackle yesterday, a month ago, a year ago. Because I think that, like you said, eventually we will lose jobs because of automation, but not only that, soft skills. Nowadays, I see people, and even myself as a millennial, let's call it, I see people having dinner just looking at the phone. But at the same time, I see people who feel entitled about anything. And I think that if we're better educated, not only in the soft skills, but also on the hard skills, it's very important to tackle that. So I would like to know, what was your role in the University of Waterloo, and how can we learn more about that? Because I think that we really need to focus on that.
Yeah, well, I'd love to brag about the University of Waterloo because I think it's one of the best schools in the world, bar none, actually. My role was strategic partnerships and university relations for the Conrad School of Business and Entrepreneurship, as well as building commercialization programs for researchers and students at the university.
So like grants, like research grants and those things as well?
No, not research grants. I'm going to have to back up and give you a bit of information about the university. So it's got an incredible DNA. It was founded, I think, 63 years ago. And one of the founding premises is that anything that you invent at the university, you own, regardless if you're a student, regardless if you're a researcher, if you're a professor, postdoc, anything. So that means you have the ability to commercialize your ideas. And so by definition, the university already attracts a certain type of student, and or mindset and or professor, because they recognize if they're entrepreneurially minded, they could theoretically commercialize something they come up with, and it belongs 100% to them. The university takes no stake in it. One of the most famous innovations that stemmed from the University of Waterloo is the BlackBerry, and the BlackBerry revolutionized the way we live today. It was essentially the inventor of the smartphone, even if it's negligible and non-existent, and anyone probably under 30 or 25 even,
I had a BlackBerry
does not know what BlackBerry is, but it is incredible how it just completely disrupted our standards of communication. And so this is one of the premises of the University of Waterloo. Again, you have your IP that is inventor-owned. The second great thing that they do is that about 80% of the students at the university, almost all faculties, require their students to do what they call cooperative education terms. So they spend 1 year in their study program, and then they spend, 1 semester in the study program, and then 1 semester out working in the field. Whether that's at a research institute, whether that's in a company, at a bank, at a nonprofit, regardless. So you do 1 semester of school, 1 semester work, 1 semester of school. And by the time you graduate, you will have amassed a year and a half of practical experience in the field. And what that does is it, A, helps you identify what you don't want to do, most importantly in life. You say, oh, guys, I had a terrible experience at the Bank of America, or I had a great experience doing a co-op term at the World Wildlife Fund. It helps you build a network. So you're working maybe at Apple as a software engineer, and you're already starting to build your network. And the third thing it does is that it helps you pay down your student tuition.
Yes. Because
you get paid to it. These aren't free internships. And if you're a really good software engineer and your 4th year, you're earning $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month. And this is pretty significant. But I think that the money is the least important aspect. You asked about soft skills. You have people doing a highly technical education, and they're learning the soft skills because they're already, during their studies, forced into working in companies, or, they are forced essentially. And so you're learning to work in teams. You're learning how to do project management. You're learning how to interact in, large, small, medium entities, things that normal students would only get after they exit their studies. So you're just creating this incredible workplace ready individual. And I find that super forward thinking, considering that was started in 1960 or something. Like, to have the vision that that's the type of workforce we're going to need in the future, not only having really deep tech or deep talent in whatever field it is, but whilst you're studying, already getting into the workplace and understanding how it is that you interact and how you want to build your career. I think that's pretty incredible. And so models like that, and then there have been copycat models, are ones that are going to prevail. I mean, there are other great models too. We have at Factory Berlin a university in-house called Code University.
I love the idea.
Super incredible. It's Germany's first state-recognized private university dedicated solely to software engineering, coding, product management, and interaction design. And the students work learn by working, because it's all project based. Mm-hmm. And so they're deciding what type of projects they want to work on, perhaps with corporate partners that help them kind of package that. And so it's extremely experiential, and that helps you identify and learn much better. And it forces you to interact with other people. I mean, who wants to go and study on their own in a library anymore, at a sole desk or in, a cafe? Life is becoming very complex. And I think, again, that these soft skills are key for us as a society to remain somewhat sane. And so if you can integrate that into your academic studies and take that route, you definitely should.
I mean, this is a question that I have to ask, since you just mentioned Code University, and for example, University of Waterloo. You've been in a very academic, more established world of academia. Let's kind of redundant academic and academia here. And you also see Code University, even though it's credited. Don't you see that there's a disparity in today's education world, and mentioning the future of education, even, that there's a gap, clearly a gap of what you need to know and you are taught in school? Because I think that most people go to, I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people go to university because they don't know what they want to do. Mm. And then they're in some place, for example, the US, I don't know how that is in Canada, for example, but I know that in the US, they are paying huge sums of money for an experiment. And I think that things like Code University, or in the US, you also have Lambda School. Here in the event, you have something called Code School, that also is doing the same thing, that it's aligning the incentives of the university and the college. So you are incentivized to learn, and the university is incentivized to give you the best preparation for the market. Because I think that there's a lot of abstract topics that people are learning in school that 60 years ago, a lot of them might have needed it, but in today's such technical and such in grave danger of fully being automized world, you need to have job-ready schools. So coming from a university world and being at factory and seeing these things, how do you see the future of education? Future, you just said, saying not being only in a library alone, you also have online education that I think that's also revolutionizing the world. So how do you see the future of education moving forward?
Well, actually, there's a great podcast about this on Freakonomics Radio, because and I didn't realize, I mean, I knew, but I didn't realize what big business the American university or college system is. Like, it is obscene. And when you have people graduating, with $90,000, $100,000, $200,000 in debt, it's just, that is wrong. I mean, it's astonishing. And even worse, if it's for an experiment because you don't know what you want to do, that is a huge burden on you and on society. And
it's something that you cannot be relieved of, that the student debt in the US, you cannot be relieved, even with bankruptcy. No. It gets passed on to the
That's right. That's right. It's completely shocking. And so I think there is going to be a huge shift needed in the US specifically, but there are all kinds of really incredible new concepts out there. I mean, there's 42, which is, a peer-to-peer study program for coding specifically. Code University I mentioned, and in every country these types of educational programs are sprouting up. And then look at the other side of the market, look at the employers. A lot of them aren't asking for grades anymore. I mean, Google, I think, announced last year that they don't require,
and Facebook as well.
Exactly, don't require a college degree. It's based on your skills, your soft skills perhaps, your interviewing prowess, and your ambition. And so these are things, again, that are completely disrupting traditional structures like the academic system. And I think we need to take a long, hard look at it. I think that Germany needs to up its game, because when I came here from Canada, I was astonished to see my daughter's, elementary school felt like it was 1970s Canada, in terms of fit out of the actual school, in terms of content, in terms of the type of learning they do, how the students are encouraged, graded, and or berated, and the fact that digital skill building isn't on the agenda at all.
Yeah, this is a conversation that I have a lot with my girlfriend when we're talking about education, even in Portugal. And I don't know how it is in Germany or even in Canada, but we were mentioning that a lot of the topics that we were learning 10 years ago when I was still in school, I think that unless you want to go on that route, it's interesting to know, but even knowing the rivers by heart, I think it no longer makes sense when you have a smartphone that can just Google it up and done. And for example, no one knows, at least in Portugal, you leave school and you have no idea how to pay taxes. You have no idea how to do a Google query search, a good query search. You have no idea how to do a lot of things. You know how to copy, but everybody knows how to do that. And you were mentioning this, and it just struck me that there's a lack of digital literacy in today's society. You have online literacy because people know how to get around, but digital literacy, I think there's a lot of lack of it. So how do you think that, is it sprouting up more boot camps and universities like Lambda School or a Code University, or do you think that should be like a complete reform of this? Okay, education right now is broken in Europe, in Asia. I don't know in Asia because I don't know, but in the US, maybe in Canada. Okay, it's broken. Let's just, from this point forward, let's just do it from the beginning, because the way that it's done, people who are teachers for 30 years who have no idea how the market is right now, or just have, like, once again, abstract knowledge of the thing. So what do you think it should be done?
Well, my answer is yes, the system is broken. I think the education system is one of the most complex, along with the tax system and the healthcare system, to tackle. And as great as it would be to start from scratch, I think that is a pipe dream. I think that we need to, governments need to think in a much more agile manner and be able to implement things much more quickly. And I don't have the solution of how that's going to happen, but there is no doubt that countries that do not at least create programming and content that are also digitally based. I'm not saying you have to stop learning a second and third language. I'm saying coding can be one of those languages. Mm-hmm. And that makes it less daunting if you call it a language versus
computer programming, computer science, engineering.
Exactly. And then you can decide, because not everyone wants to be a coder, whether that is something you want to pursue, but it should become an option in school and not just a side extracurricular boot camp on the side, because then it doesn't enter into our consciousness that it's important for our society and part of our educational journey.
I agree. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier is the fact that people need to know how to work together as well. And it's something that I saw a lot in Factory, and something that I can share with you, that when I was at Factory, I was working on this podcast, and I always said, hey, if anyone needs help with the podcast, and I've actually helped 2 or 3 people buying gear, trying to host their own podcast. So I think that also being able to be more agile, not even on a governmental side, but on a personal side, it's also very important. I heard the podcast yesterday with Naval Ravikant from AngelList, and Joe Rogan, and Naval was saying that the future of work will be much more agile, more on a personal level. It's almost a fully gig economy to everyone. And it's something that I also saw, and I would like to get your input on Factory's availability and openness to promote this kind of gig. I won't say even economy, because a lot of people just did it for free, but on a co-working, and when I say co-working, not as a space, but people working together, co-learning, co-understanding, co-living.
Yeah, that's what we talk about it as a co-learning concept, co-learning and co-creation. I mean, that's really where we want to get to. We really encourage our members to share their knowledge, and because we believe that peer-to-peer learning is the best learning. And we don't want to orchestrate and manipulate everything. So we see success happen at Factory when we create an environment, both a tech environment and a physical environment that incentivizes that. Mm-hmm. So the way that we design our spaces makes you constantly interact with people.
You have to.
Yeah, you have to. You have to when you have to go to the water cooler. You have to when you go to the washrooms, because you're always constantly moving in the buildings. We have so many events. Events are a key component to matching and getting people out that have similar interests. That's one thing. The other thing is, when you become a member of Factory Berlin, there is kind of this inherent expectation that you are going to give back and share. And so you just give the example that you did that. We have lots of members that sign up to circles that are certain interest groups that we have in the community. So we have like a developers circle, a mobility, an IoT, a blockchain, a women in tech. Exactly. We have about, I think, 7 circles right now. These are interest groups out of the community. They're formed organically, so they're formed on the Slack channel. And when we see that there's a critical mass of people that rally around a certain theme, we elevate it. We identify what we call captains of those circles. Those are people that are particularly strong champions, and give them the resources, free space, free drinks, food, whatever it is they need, so that they can meet up on a regular basis and share. Because we see that's where the success is coming from. That's where ideas are sprouting. That's where ideas are then turned into projects. That's where sometimes they even turn into teams, and ideally even companies. So we believe that having this, peer-to-peer networking opportunity, to learn, to work and learn alongside each other is key. So that's why we have, again, if you see the user experience, you become a member, you go to Slack, a digital tool that helps you kind of, identify who it is that you want to communicate on a regular basis. And then we bring it back to the physical, and that we provide these members with the spaces so that they can meet and interact and then truly create something out of that.
I think that's incredible. But a question that I have for you is in terms of scalability. Do you see Factory as something that can be grown? Obviously, I don't think that Factory wants to grow like a WeWork and sprout like mushrooms everywhere. But do you think that Factory will ever grow into being a more internationally physical community? Because I know there's a big international community digitally, but do you think there will be an option or a place for a place will be, but do you think there will be a possibility for Factory to also grow organically, internationally on a physical level? Because I think that's what's missing a lot. And in my opinion, is that if I ever go somewhere, I know that you have partnerships with Google for entrepreneurs and all those things, but you see Factory as a possibility to grow physically to other places and leaving Berlin?
Absolutely. No, we definitely do. It's on our roadmap. I mean, I think we put a huge stake in the ground in Berlin, and we have two incredible, very large locations here, with almost 25,000 square meters. I don't think we would do that type of massive investment in another location, but we do have international, even national aspirations, because we have the demand. We have such a demand from abroad. It's astounding, because people have not seen this type of concept before, because it is so novel and unique. And so the question is, how do you scale that, and how do you tap into existing networks that are also trusted, right? You have to do it. You have to find the right people on the ground in the right places where you have that critical mass and think you can grow a community relatively quickly. So one way for us to do that is, because we have the digital tool, we can also assess where those clusters of people are coming from. Are we going to see, many more people needing to convene in Kuala Lumpur, or is it going to be in Zurich? And that's based on that type of assessment, we are going to expand. But I agree that, kind of it's daunting to scale, and we don't want to become a WeWork, or even there are others out there that maybe have, 20, 30 locations, large ones, because it's hard to keep the quality of community when you have hundreds of thousands of people. People stop engaging. It's natural. So we believe in an approach where we scale in with smaller so-called clubs, and then also digitally, so that you can tap into them. That's right.
It's very interesting. And one of the questions that I had to ask you, and you mentioned this in the beginning on the corporate level, is that startups, and this is starting to become more and more prevalent these days, is that corporates want to be more engaged with startups. And I remember having, I think it was a Deutsche Bank room in Mitte. For people who don't know what Mitte is let's call it a borough of Berlin. And how does Factory and you as a relationship, the chief relationship officer in this area, help corporates that might want to be more engaged with the startup world, with innovation? How do you basically connect these two dots, which in theory, as a goal, startups want to eventually become corporates, but are so far away in the size and money, but at the same time, corporates want to become startups, want to become agile, want to do stuff, and not only be bothered down by just so many processes and bureaucracy. How do you make these two connections work?
Well, it's a lot of translation work, to be honest. I mean, the corporates that we have already have expressed their willingness and openness to become part of the factory and be open to that type of conversation taking place. That doesn't mean that they automatically work with startups or invest in startups in the community. It always depends on the corporate. Some of them come to Factory Berlin because they want to create a new cultural mindset for their employees and offer their employees the opportunity to experience the new world of work and totally new generation that has different aspirations than working in a corporate. But for the corporates that really want to interact actively with startups, it's a lot of hand-holding at the beginning. We have to help them understand how to communicate. Sides, right? Absolutely. How to communicate with a startup. The fact that a startup most likely won't have the runway to go through a procurement process with a DAX company in Germany. And so what is it that the two parties want to get out of it? And then it's a lot of managing expectations. We've had some great success stories of corporates working together with startups and then investing in them. And then there's been a few fails as well. We have to be quite honest. It's part of the startup world, and it's part of the corporate world. And corporates need to realize that just because they say they want to work with a startup doesn't mean that's going to make them more agile. Oh, it always depends on who's making that decision and what team is out there doing what with whom. And so you can't just open up a fancy office in Berlin or anywhere for that matter, as a corporate and expect all of a sudden to become super agile, to understand Scrum and be able to attract talent. It's going to take a lot more than that. And I think that, certainly, in Germany, there's definitely a need to have more of an open-minded, open innovation mindset filter through the halls.
I totally agree with you. I mean, this is a conversation that I've had with a teacher of entrepreneurship here in Germany. He's an author of a best-selling book. And I also interviewed Alexander Ostenwalder, and he says that Alexander said corporates need to risk much more if they want to become much bigger. And the professor, Gunther Folten, said that the problem a lot in Europe as a whole is not only Germany. In Portugal, it's this exact same thing. A lot of corporates say they want to be hip. They want to be startups, but the moment they see a presentation, then they might say, okay, this is not professional. I don't care. I think that there's a problem with a lot of fear of failure. I think that Europe was built with such a lot of bad things, but we want to be big, that a risk of failure is daunting to us. Well, for example, we look at the US, where people say, oh, startups flourish. It's because I feel that a lot of them just don't care about failing. Fail, try again. Fail, try again.
And if not, it could be the downfall of our economies in Europe. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot is at risk. We're dreadfully behind. I mean, I'm sounding like a broken record because come to this conference or any other, just open the newspapers. We all know that, whether it's in AI and IoT. I mean, the list goes on. But I think we need to have that mentality that is, much less risk averse, but this is going back to our topic before, educational system. Look at the way the educational system works here. If you are constantly being berated for making mistakes, and your grades are based on making mistakes, not on the learnings out of those mistakes.
You're evaluated by your memory, basically.
Correct.
You're not evaluated by the understanding. I think that besides math, but even math, you can memorize formulas. Besides math, almost everything that I've ever experienced is the memorization capability. Mm-hmm. In university, I remember this. I studied by my girlfriend's notes. I got a better note from her because I was able to memorize her notes better than herself. Mm. I still have no idea what the class was about. I did the class. I did the test. Before the test, I said, I have no idea what this class is about. I did the test, still have no idea. 3 years later, same thing. And I don't know. This is really scary. And one other thing you mentioned the AI, but you mentioned also this conference organized by We Are Developers. And I know that Factory has a relationship with We Are Developers. What's this? So first of all, do you want to explain what We Are Developers is to the audience back home?
Sure. I mean, We Are Developers is a platform for tech talent, for coders and developers that are looking for jobs. And you would say, well, I don't think it's needed. There are so many jobs out there for developers, but the engagement rate with top talent and the job search is quite low. And so what We Are Developers is looking to achieve is that they help the right talents find the right jobs in the right organizations. So they're matching really good jobs and interesting opportunities with the talent, very much tailored to the individual's needs. Where we see ourselves as complementary is that we have a similar value set in that we identify top talents and we want to bring them together with opportunities. We also believe in diversity and we believe in peer-to-peer networking. And at the end of the day, all these things are hopefully going to bring a better future and reimagine kind of the world in that we live in. On top of that, our chairman and founder, Udo Schlömer, is also invested in We Are Developers, as is also Thomas Bacham, the founder of Code University. Mm-hmm. So we also have an interest in their success because we believe in their business model. And they've proven with this World Congress that has attracted, I think, over 7,500 people here to Berlin, that there's a market out there. And even if you have a great digital platform and matchmaking tool, that the physical, bringing it into the physical and into this interaction and experiential mode is key.
Makes it concrete, I think.
Absolutely.
I think that the problem with job hunting, not even in the tech world, I'm still not in the tech world, but I see it as becoming concrete that things are happening. And I just wanted to take something that you said, is that you said that We Are Developers looks for the right talent for the right company. So is it more company focused or is it more person focused? You also mentioned the individual, because I think it's important where companies, or is it twofold? I know that you, as a recruitment company, as a talent company, will have to be twofold, but is it more focused on the individual?
It's definitely more. I mean, I don't want to speak for We Are Developers, but
on your own experience with the conversations,
it's definitely more focused on the talent side. Definitely. Okay. I mean, that the talent is the key. We see it in our community. We Are Developers said this last night as well. I mean, without talent, we are all lost, regardless if you're, a BMW or if you're Slack or if you're starting your own venture. Mm-hmm. We all need talent and we all need to position ourselves as interesting places to work in great surroundings, with the right teams and the right mindset. People aren't automatically going to gravitate to a big brand like they did 20 years ago or 30 years ago and spend, half of their career or even their entire career working at Toyota. Those days are over. I mean, there may be a few, but I haven't met them in the last 10 years. And so it's harder and harder for companies to not only attract, but retain talent. I mean, look at the problem of the Valley and the Bay Area. People jump jobs, every 6 to 18 months if they get a better ESOP package, or another $100,000. And people have no sense of commitment or belonging to their companies anymore.
And I think that's also a bad thing, a very bad thing.
Absolutely, it's a bad thing. I mean, I'm not glorifying it. I'm saying it's a bad thing. It's terrible, and so it's challenging for companies to create that environment, but that's what they have to focus on. They really do, and it's also hard for startups to be able to acquire talent because they can't afford to pay the big bucks. So sometimes, I mean, arguably they could be at an advantage because they are getting people that will buy in. I mean, they're buying into to building something.
The promise of a better product,
hopefully,
a better service.
and if you get the right people and they believe in what you're doing, they want to help. They want to help grow a company, and that's the best type of employee, someone that's going to be around for the long run, or to build something at least, and not just for the salary.
And Factory here, in relation to We Are Developers, basically opens the network, saying, here are a myriad of great, talented people. You have access to these people, and talk with them to try to understand. And at the same time, We Are Developers is saying, hey, this is what you can find. If you are this talented, this is where you can aspire to become. Is that it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we target a similar or same audience in the sense that we believe that these people are key to our future. Mm-hmm. One, we believe that they're super ambitious, that they're open-minded, and we both have those values. And although Factory Berlin is not only focused on technologists, we obviously think that we need to bring them into the membership to also balance out the other types of members that we have out there. Because
and even the events, I mean, you're educating, you're giving other perspectives. You're even, I remember the yoga circles, or not yoga circle, but yoga activities, events on education, on GDPR and everything. And all these things, I think it's very important. Before we wrap up the interview, I'd like to know about this is, what's your opinion is, so how do we get more talent? How do we develop more talent? Because I noticed that our conversation goes a lot around this. And I think that's something that every conversation that nowadays I have with somebody who's a little bit ideologistically interested in the future is, how do we get more talent? So how do you think that on a personal level, how can I affect the talent of the future? How can you affect the talent of the future? How can somebody who's listening to this conversation right now on a commute, working out, whatever, how can we affect the talent, or how can we make sure that the future is better for everyone and not only for me or you or the person who's working?
Well, I think you're already playing your part because you're creating content that's valuable and that people are listening to and hopefully learning from. Again, I think that our society is going to be in a stronger place if we accept that we need to co-learn, and it's not about top-down learning anymore, but it's kind of a 360-degree learning journey that we're on, and it never stops, right? Mm-hmm. So content on demand learning is going to become more and more prevalent for us. New education models, as I said, that don't take forever to finish a degree, that maybe you don't even need a good degree. I think that creating, like we have communities, and it doesn't have to be, based on entrepreneurship or technology, just having a sense of belonging to someone is going to be very helpful to create, a more holistic society in future. And talent, talent is mobile nowadays. I think this is one thing we see in Berlin. I lived here from 2006 till 2011, and I cannot say that I thought Berlin was very international at that point.
Really?
At all. It was very hard to hire talent and find any here at all, or even get them to come to Berlin.
Who knew?
Exactly. And now I walk down my street and I barely hear any German. I hear a lot of Spanish and French and English and Polish, and I think it's great. I think it's incredible what's happened, and I think it's such a fascinating time because people are so mobile. And so, yes, we need to create a lot of new talent. We need to create surroundings for talent to feel at home, but we also have to realize that people aren't tied to places anymore. People of your generation and younger, I know people that they're here for 3 months and then I see them and they're in Bali all of a sudden, and then they're doing a work project in Dubai, and then all of a sudden they're in Mexico, and I can't keep track. And I find that completely fascinating. It's going to be a challenge to traditional employers, but it also puts us on the cusp of a whole new type of future of work environment, right? Because remote work is definitely a thing. We talk about it now, but if you want good people, they don't necessarily want to sit in an office. Not even in the middle of Berlin.
Yes, that definitely, at least during the winter time. Coming from Lisbon, this winter hurts my bones and it hurts my soul. Okay, before we finish, I like to have a quick fire round. So basically, ask one question as fast as possible to answer.
Okay. Tell me food related.
Okay, I can ask you a food related question, but the first one is, tell me 1 to 3 books that have impacted your life the most.
Oh my goodness. Okay, Homo Deus. I just got a great one on art and political subversity in art. And the third book, I'm terrible at these fire talks. Animal Farm, actually, Orson Welles.
Orson Welles or George Orwell?
Oh, George Orwell. There we go. See, it's too fire talk. Yeah.
I'm actually trying. I've actually been reading 1984, and I'm so scared reading to that. It's I get very.
It's quite on point.
Nowadays, even I think it's starting to get a little bit more.
Is that a mandatory reading in schools here? Do you know? It was in Canada.
I don't think so. At least in Portugal, it wasn't. We read more Portuguese and Latin literature than anything else. But it's.
But scary. Animal Farm for sure. Also.
Do you have any life motto or quote that you like to live by?
Yes, never get too comfortable.
Okay, very nice. If you had a chance to go back in time and talk with your university just graduated self, what would you say to her?
Oh, God, I would say maybe you should have paid more attention in some classes, but just keep on going, because I totally jumped off a bridge when I left university and went out on my own and risked everything. So I was actually pretty happy with that stage.
Well, Catherine, I really had a great time talking with you. Where can people find more about you? Where can people eventually get in touch with you?
You can get in touch with me at Factory Berlin, of course, through LinkedIn and or on Twitter, Instagram, all the usual social channels.
Is it Catherine Bischoff?
It's actually cat_in_Berlin. That's my
CAT_in_Berlin.
Correct.
Both in Instagram and Twitter?
That's right.
Fantastic. Once again, really had a great time. Great pleasure talking with you. As a send-off point, feel free to send a message to anyone who's listening to this wrap-up of the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for plugging into this episode. I truly hope you love this conversation as much as I did. Catherine really opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I truly love hearing more of her opinion on the state of education in today's society. Any other information that you might have missed will probably be linked up in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, consider subscribing to make sure that this podcast grows. We can get to more people and help everyone be the pioneers of their lives and careers. If there's any feedback, please feel free to reach out on social media. A big thank you to Catherine for her time. A big thank you to Sophie Muller for PR for arranging this conversation, and to Thibaut Flondlin, aka DJ Rodia, for the music of the Pioneers Show. So, till next time, talk to you later. Bye-bye.